I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital because this should be a bipartisan bill. We have tremendous numbers of people and drugs pouring into our country. So in order to secure it, we need a wall. We need closing enforcement. We have to close enforcement loopholes, give immigration officers, and these are tremendous people, the border security agents, the ICE agents, we have to give them the equipment they need.
The president says he wants to help the dreamers, but he also will not budge without his wall. So the question is, politically here, should the Democrats play ball here or stand firm? Let's bring in our panel. We have Republican strategist Joseph Pinion. We also have Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Scott Vanderhoff, Republican Rockland County executive for 5 terms, now co-chairman of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And, you know, Scott, first of all, I thought it was really interesting when the cameras were there. And then after a while, and yes, of course, the motivations, it even was leaked, was, especially since the release of the book, they wanted to put him in a position where they looked presidential. He was engaged. It's amazing how these things qualify as like news today. But the president was engaged. He was involved. But it was also interesting to see. And for me, there was 3 or 4 times, as I talked about with the congressman last segment, where he seemed to, with the last person that would say something, contradict himself and almost say, yeah, sure, we'll do a clean bill on DACA. And then all of a sudden McCarthy or some Republicans are like, whoa, 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 slow down. That's not what we're saying here. You're cutting our legs out when we negotiate if we want to have a wall or whatever else. But nonetheless, it was optically at least really interesting. But you get a sense as how complicated it is in today's day and age with this president to get something done that's not strictly on party lines.
No, you're right, and it was fascinating. He wasn't quite listening to people,
no.
So he would repeat.
He just wants to sign something. Yeah.
But you know what? Some of the things that people who are closer to him or the administration says, he's very cordial in these kinds of circumstances. He's not the Twitter freak that we know. He's not he's cordial, and you could see that in this kind of operation. And the fact of the matter is that conservatives, staunch conservatives, are very upset because.
Ann Coulter literally almost, spontaneously combusted when he was saying, yeah, maybe we'll do this part and we'll figure out the rest later.
But I think he really needs, and I think you're seeing this. He's putting on the charm because he needs to have some positive things happen here, and he believes that in immigration he can somehow put this together, but it is complicated. We're only talking about a 2-phase operation. Right. No one really knows what that means yet. So, but I thought he was quite, he was charming in his way.
But it was also to the last person who spoke to him. At one point, I think it was Dianne Feinstein who said something in the room to him, and he was like, yeah, okay, maybe we'll do that, when she was asking for a clean bill, and then the freak out happened. And there's 2 other instances where he seemed to change his position on. Nonetheless, he seems to be approaching this that he has the luxury of time, which he doesn't. It was mentioned the last time they tried to do immigration reform, it took 7 months just to get the piece of legislation, up for a vote here, and it didn't even happen. We don't have that time.
Well, particularly when it comes to DACA, because that policy expires on March 9th, and you'll start to see people getting rejected for sending out their applications. I think as of March 9th, they'll wind up being exposed to possible expulsion from the country. In reality, they may need a bill signed on DACA within like the next week or so.
Just to put a point on where you're saying, so the audience follows, Democrats are freaking out, and not just Democrats, people are freaking out because there's a 2-month window before the DACA triggers kick in. Right. Conversely here, the president said today on more than one occasion in the meeting, hey, we're not that far apart here from having some grand bargain on immigration reform. And everybody from both sides of the table, like, this takes a lot longer than 2 months to do.
Well, particularly when you have 2 polarized positions on DACA and the wall, which are completely at odds with one another. The Democrats want DACA, and a lot of Republicans feel like that would be considered giving amnesty to people who came into the country illegally. So there's a huge divide there. There's an even larger divide on the wall, and we'll get into that in a second. But Democrats probably feel as though they cannot vote for the wall at all. And I know that's the theme of the topic, so I'll...
Yeah, and Dom, again, you look at math. We talked about the timing and the calendar, but also the polling, okay? And the pressures on Democrats here. If they're seen as capitulating with this president, a highly unpopular president and a subject that they think they want to campaign on, more than 80-some-odd% of the public, as the congressman said, they're against kicking out the DACA kids. Conversely, the vast majority of people are opposed to building this wall that the president's talked about and Mexico supposedly was going to pay for. So the Democrats they're in a tough spot. They don't want to be seen as obstructionary, but if they help the president, even on some stuff that they think, you know what, we'll dress it up and call it something else. We'll give them some funding for the wall. We'll get the DACA. Everyone wins at the end. They still face some political blowback.
Democrats do not win, Richard, if they compromise in any possible way on the wall. If they compromise on the wall and give the president his wall, they lose all the leverage they have for the midterm elections. They cannot do that. So we're dealing with, it was just, to me, it was remarkable to watch that event because, as you said, the president made several major mistakes. He basically said, let's do DACA by itself. Let's do the wall by itself. It exposed him. I know what the point of having a bipartisan meeting with all the live cameras, but we got to see that things are still not going as smoothly from if you're paying attention. Things are still not going as smoothly as you would expect from this president of the United States.
And we know there's not one monolith Republican Party, Joseph. Right. But to that end, the Coulters and the hard right folks, they were promised, and they're going to keep reminding the president, you're going to build this wall with Mexico's money here, and we were going to kick out all the illegals, okay? Now they're getting the sense the president is willing to negotiate. He doesn't really want to move on DACA the way maybe some of the hard right portion of the party wants to. But this base that he thinks will never leave him no matter what, at least some voices are saying, you go there, Mr. President, here, you're going to lose some of us. Which one is it?
Well, I think this is the unfortunate problem with the tact that President Trump has chosen through the first year of his presidency and continuing into the second year of his presidency. He has basically placed himself in a politically untenable situation where he has gotten to the point where the only thing he basically has left is that core hard constituency. And so now anything that in many ways disenfranchises them leaves him politically vulnerable when you start talking about the investigation, when you start talking about how do I ever attempt to pass anything, how do we ever try to attempt to get anything done during the midterms. And so really it was a strategic, I think, misstep because we've
But
said
he
this
seemed to say
before.
today that, hey, I'll take the heat. He kept saying, you know, I can handle the heat. And he believes that, what was the line? I can shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue, they'll still vote for me. That these people will never leave him no matter what. All he has to do is go in front of the cameras, even if he grants permanent citizenship to the DACA kids and says he doesn't get his wall but gets some funding for border security, he'll say, we got everything we wanted. And as long as he says it, that's enough. Well, you buy that?
I think that the president actually has a slightly better hand than I think people give him credit for, in spite of all the things that we've talked about, because of the fact that ultimately you have to separate the moral aspect from actually the political aspect. The moral aspect is it's ingrained in America that we don't punish children for the actions of their parents. The political reality is that if the Democrats are to shut down the government in defense of less than a couple 100,000 individuals, to the detriment of a nation where we have over 350 million individuals, that is going to cause a great political pain. And so on some basic level, yes, I'm a believer that the wall does not actually make us safer. That yes, we need to secure our borders, but we should use best practices. We should use drones. We should use things, go sector by sector, like everyone that talks about it, from the CIA to the FBI. Anyone who knows anything about foreign policy will tell you. But the political reality is that right now we have a president that basically can sit back and run out the clock, knowing that the Democrats can play chicken and possibly lose.
Democrats cannot vote for the wall in any way, shape, or form. It would inflame their base. It gives Trump a political win that they can't afford to let him have. And worst of all, it would make the wall bipartisan. And then at some point when you have to stop funding for the wall or tear the wall down, the argument is, well, but this got bipartisan support. Democrats voted for it too. They cannot allow it.
I know people's statements and facts no longer seem to matter anymore, but if people watched, and I know you guys did, to that 45 minutes to an hour long, live and in Technicolor exchange, he basically negotiated himself in a spot. And they can play his own words against him because he seemed open more than a few times to treat DACA separately and then get to the issue of this grand bargain with immigration reform. We'll see how this plays out, but as Andrew said, time running out. All right, coming up next, it seemed like a fanciful question not too long ago, but now I can tell you for a fact a lot of operatives are taking it very seriously. Oprah Winfrey, will she run? And do Democrats really even want her to? Some big names, they're making their positions very clear on the topic.